Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris and welcome to part 4 out of this 4-part series summarizing the many different LEGO Legends of Chima concept artwork, set prototypes, minifigure designs, and finally, for part 4 we're taking a look at the beautiful pieces of concept art made for the TV show itself. Now, thankfully the LEGO Legends of Chima team actually published a lot of this concept artwork right when Chima ended in 2015 on their website, which is where I'm getting most of these images, and you can tell a lot of development effort went into this massive LEGO theme. They could probably make an entire art book full of all these gorgeous designs. And so if you're curious about some of the early concepts, which you can see right now, of the early iterations of the theme, from humans donning animal masks to use animal powers and all sorts of different villains and cancelled tribes, or if you want to take a closer look at the minifigure concepts themselves, or even some of the set prototypes, do go check out the other 3 videos in this series. And now it's time to jump right into the TV show artwork itself. Let's go. Now, for the LEGO Legends of Chima TV show, LEGO actually contracted a lot of famous and very prolific artists who work on some of the biggest video games and movies to produce the concept art for the show, which resulted in one of the most stunningly beautiful landscapes that we've ever gotten for any sort of LEGO show ever in the form of the Chima landscape. Now, of course, I think the perfect place to start are some of the shots around Mount Kavora, and the way that I tried to structure this video is by starting off by the general locations of the world and not leading into any specific places, and then going into the actual locations we have concept art for, like the Lion Temple or the Croc Swamp, and then finally taking a look at the concept art for the vehicles and even the weapons that the minifigs wielded. Now, this makes for honestly just a really stunning wallpaper background. Just look at the amount of detail here. It is one of the most gorgeously rendered pieces that I've ever seen a LEGO theme use, and this just really brings a lot of world building to the table, and I kind of wish that Chima capitalized a little bit more on the world building opportunities they had from the concept artwork, because just by looking at these images alone, this is a rich and vibrant world that had a lot of potential for exploration. There you can see Mount Kavora right in front of the sunrise or sunset, and the entire land illuminated around it in a gorgeous vista. And that's not all, because we got a lot of different concept art for Chima, such as this one, which Tommy Anderson actually stated on Twitter was one of the very first finalized concept artwork pieces for the world itself. Here you can see the looping archways and vistas of the bridges and canyons leading all the way up to the Lion Chi Temple, and then Mount Kavora rising up on the horizon right in the distance. Now, this again is a really beautiful art print that really lends a sense of mystery to the world. You can see all sorts of exotic plants and animals flying around. There's a lot of mist swirling around the bottom, and it really has this air of mystery and exploration that makes you want to go here and explore the world yourself. Of course, from there we had a lot of close-ups of Mount Kavora, such as the eagle sculpture right here. Initially, Kavora seems like it was supposed to have almost like a halo of rocks surrounding it, like a ring around it, while unfortunately for the final design we just got the main rock itself. I think it would have been really cool for it to actually have rocks orbiting it, almost like the gravity around it was a little bit different, which I think is such a cool concept. Here, this image is one of the earlier concept designs for what would become Mount Kavora. Obviously, you can see the shaping isn't quite there, but you still have the general design of the large floating mountain and the animal faces carved into the side. I think a good transition from here is to take a look at this particular piece of artwork made in 2011. Now, this of course was when Ninjago first launched, but they were trying to explore the different types of backgrounds and artwork for the actual landscapes of Chima. From a village at night, which kind of looks like the Beaver Village, to the mountain itself, which hadn't even been named at this point, to the forest and the swamp. These were some of the earliest designs for the entire world that we eventually got a chance to explore fully in the TV show itself. Going into the more granular concepts here, you can see just how much effort went into designing each and every one of the flowers and the different pieces of vegetation that would line the land. This is specifically for the animators to actually take these flowers and multiply it. You can see this is just Flower Hill number 1 here, and just the incredible amount of design work and assets that were made for creating this gorgeous world. Moving inwards, we actually have the forest road here. This concept sketch is really especially cool because you can see the date it was drawn on the bottom. April 26, 2012 was when this was drawn, or at least finalized, so you can really see they were ramping up the design aspect for Chima to launch in 2013, and honestly that's surprisingly pretty late for them to have been making this less than a year before the theme actually launched, but I guess the TV show was a little bit later in development. Here's another image of that forest road where you can see the Lion Gateway, and again, some really gorgeous concept art that actually translated pretty much one-to-one for the TV show itself. Sure, the locations might not have had the exact vibe that these concept artwork pieces have, but they actually are very, very close to what we eventually got. Now here is one of my favorite pieces. This is also dated to April 27, 2012. Presumably the same person who worked on the first forest road just went and made this the next day. And this is the beautiful night landscape for the world of Chima. You can see some stunning waterfalls up in the distance, the moon illuminating the surface here. And again, this is just one of my favorite pieces where you can really get a sense of awe and mystery from the stars in the world above, just like a world begging to be explored. Moving on from that, we have some more granular looks at the plants themselves in these swamps, like these kind of gaseous plants right here that are glowing orange. And then we have some more concepts for the spiky rocks here. I think my favorite thing about the concepts for the Eternal Gorge here are the fact that you can actually see very clearly the night starry landscape above them. It's really interesting how clear the skies are, because obviously it's really untouched by a lot of pollution and whatnot. It's really a natural paradise, and you can truly see all the different stars orbiting in the sky above, lending it again to that air of mystery and exploration that there's something even beyond this world. Now, of course, we have even more concept artwork leading into the Forever Rock here, which was one of the landscapes that was most visited in the TV show itself, and this is really close to what we eventually got. It was a nice little gathering place for friends and sometimes enemies to talk and discuss treaty negotiations and peace treaties and whatnot amongst them. And this next image here actually looks very close to the final render we would have gotten for the TV show itself, which again had some of the most stunning animation out of any LEGO series. But now venturing into the forests and swamps, we can see even more pieces of concept art of what appears to be even a river running through the forest, which is really interesting, and the forest roads, which were home to many a speedo race, which again is pretty close to the final renders for the show itself. But now it's time to turn away from the main world and the natural landscapes and take a look at some of these specific locations. This is the Lion Temple, and it's interesting because you can actually see the numbered designs of each of the Lion Temples being worked on in the corner there. So this is Lion Temple 01, so pretty much the first concept they worked with. We have 01-2 WIP here, so they changed the positioning and placement of the back tower and the lion face itself, and the staircase did change a little bit as well, becoming a little less steep. Then we have Lion Temple 01-2, so this is just changing ever so slightly the style of the back temple right there. And then we have a very different design, 013, with a very realistic looking lion sculpture. I think that's a little bit uncanny to me because it almost looks like something that humans would make, or like a human-like sculpture there, where you can see that most of the temple itself is pretty much taking shape, but I'm glad they did eventually change the lion to something a little bit more blocky. Of course, number 5 here actually is taking no lion at all, and you just have the temple itself, which I don't think was the best choice either. It definitely needed some sort of a lion, but this is the first one that is fully colored in, which is really interesting to see for the concept art itself. Now moving onwards, we have 015 here, which was pretty much the final one, where they really were trying to sketch out what they wanted the face of the lion to look like. And finally, here is pretty much the final design that we got in the show itself. Obviously, the headpiece would change a little bit, but this is basically the final temple. And man, this is a really cool setting to see. Moving on from that, we have a couple other alternate views of the different designs, such as number 2 here with the different lion temple. This is a full-on 3D render, so they actually made the effort to make an entire 3D model of the lion city here. This is number 3 and number 2 progressing, where you can see that the sketches were done to actually add in some vehicle hangars, showing the exact placement of the throne room and Laval's room, and gates for the tanks and vehicles, plus a marketplace where they explicitly are saying do not have any water in the marketplace. Of course, these sketches eventually culminated in one of these final designs where you can see here, this city truly looks lived in, and unfortunately in the show we didn't actually get to see a lot of those smaller buildings in the actual village there. The scale of it was turned slightly downwards to actually allow the characters to run easily across the drawbridge, but again, it's a really interesting design for one of the most fascinating concepts for the design of the temple itself. Moving on from that, we have the interior of the throne room itself. Now this is a really interesting concept sketch that almost looks a little bit more dramatic and sinister compared to what we eventually got. The chi pool is actually kind of a cracked-like design where you can really see the energy radiating out from it, and while the design we eventually got was a little bit more warm and welcoming and friendly, this is definitely one of the more dramatic and stoic designs that we got, which would have definitely given it a completely different vibe. Now moving on from that, we have some different concepts of Laval's bedroom itself, which of course, much like all of the other designs here, had a lot of effort put into what they wanted to actually make the bedroom look like. Here's one of the other designs, which of course features the classic Lego wooden duck, which I really wish they still included in the show, but I guess it wouldn't have made much sense for him to have a standard regular duck animal toy because there are no ducks in Chima, which is unfortunate. I would have loved to see ducks, but there are no ducks in Chima, so I guess the toy didn't really make sense to include, but I think it's a nice Easter egg for those looking for it. Now, moving on from that, we have a concept sketch from January 2012 of the garage here. Notice that it specifically calls it a Ripper Garage, which I presume was one of the early concept names for speedors, and this is kind of in the interior of the Lion Temple where the motorcycles actually raced out of. Now here we have the simply titled Speeder, not Speedor, but Speeder Garage. This is the opposite view towards the waterfalls themselves where the vehicles would actually go out of, and this actually was an approved design, so you can actually see some vestiges of this in the TV show itself, in the rare instances we actually saw the garage. But moving on from that, it's time to pivot away from the Lion Temple and go to another one of the massive hero buildings, and those are the Eagle Spires. So this massive landscape here shows the entire landscape of Chima with the majestic Eagle Spires being erected all the way in the back of the landscape itself. Moving onwards here, we have a very vertical piece of concept art of the Eagle Spire itself, which was a very unique and inspired design for a home base for the eagles themselves. This is a more landscape-oriented photo that showcases the spire in all its glory with the painted eagle arcing upwards towards the sky, which is a very striking visual design. The silhouette is absolutely captured there, and here we have just some more iterations on the spire itself, going all the way down to the buildings as well as all the little different side cliffs and whatnot, the little buildings and towns built into the cliffs themselves, which of course didn't need bridges or roads because the eagles themselves could fly, which is a really cool design. And now, for the main center library, they did a lot of different concepts for the floating bookcases, obviously held up by these gaseous plants, which are really cool to see. Now, this is pretty much the exact design that we did eventually get in the TV show, so it's really cool to see at least some of these designs actually being integrated into the show itself, despite them honestly not really being used as well as they probably could have. The Eagles headquarters was really only featured a couple of times in the TV show itself, mostly for pretty goofy episodes, and I kind of wish that this place had a much more serene and serious vibe to it because the concept art really leans into that aspect. Here we have some more of the villages, which honestly kind of remind me of Utapau from Star Wars in the way that they're built, but yeah, these are the Eagle Tribe villages, and you can see some Eagle Tribe villages and originally were supposed to be built around Kavora Mountain, which presumably were the rocks surrounding the mountain, so it was a very different design for the Eagle Tribe, which probably was one of the earliest designs that they had there. And you can see these are dated either to, I'm guessing they're not November 2012 because that would have been far too late. This is probably December 2011, given that these drawings are a very early concept for what would eventually become the Eagle Tribe, located in a completely different part of the town. And from there, we can take a look at yet another one of the flying aviator bird-like creatures' homes, and this is the Raven Village. We only have one image of the concept art for the Raven Village, but man, is it an impressive one, where you can see here that this is the Raven Junkyard, which gives a completely different vibe to the Eagle Village. One thing I really like about this particular piece of concept artwork is that it really does feel massive in scale. If you really zoom in, you can see the amount of detail being added to the homes in the Raven Spire here, and it truly feels like a massive design. Where the Raven design that we got in the show was kind of just like a junkyard, we didn't really get anything close to this. It's still really cool seeing just the scope and scale of this massive Raven yard right here. And from there, it's time to take a look at one other villainous faction and their home base, the Crocodiles. So here we have a series of concept artwork for the Croc Swamp Hideout, or as it was called then, the Croc Fort. This here is the first iteration of it, which literally was just a wooden crocodile carved out of a log there, which was one of the approved designs. Here's the second design, which brings us a little bit closer to the Lego set itself that we got for the Croc Swamp Hideout. And again, there's a lot of different iterations of it. They were trying to experiment with whether or not they wanted to make it just a crocodile head emerging from the swamp and then some wooden-like designs in the back, or if they wanted to have a lot of hiding spots for vehicles like they have here, and just a lot of different designs for the trees themselves. Moving into the Croc Swamp Hideout itself, you have the throne room, and this throne room is very close to what we saw in the TV show, but I just really like the vibe and aesthetic. It has this very dark, ominous, and haunting vibe to it, which is absolutely what you want to capture for the interior of a villain lair, which is very cool to see. And of course, even beyond just the Croc Swamp Hideout itself, we have a lot of different designs for these swamps themselves, where you can see this design was made in November of 2011 and approved from there, with multiple different concepts for each of the different areas of these swamps being used for the eventual TV show itself, both in black and white and color. But with that, we can move on to some of the other designs here. This is the jungle, which you can see here is moving away from the swamp and into the jungle, leading us to our only concept art that we got for the gorilla villages, where you can actually see the finalized gorilla mechs hanging from the treetops themselves, and the massive gorilla tree fort right there, which again is pretty close to what we eventually got. I personally would have preferred maybe a much larger castle or building-like sculpture for the gorillas themselves, maybe with the actual face of a gorilla mounted in it, but this isn't too bad either. And finally, we just have one piece of concept artwork for the Beavers Fort here, which is interesting how much effort went into developing the landscape for the beavers, given that we never even got a beaver minifigure until year 3, and even then that was kind of an afterthought. But with that, we have summed up all of the location-based concept artwork sketches, and it's time to briefly take a look at what would become the storyboards for the very first episode. Thanks to Tommy Anderson's 24 Days of Chima, which was a special thing he did in December of 2021, where he showcased a lot of different Chima concept artwork, here we can see a lot of the early storyboards for what would become the first few minutes of episode 1 of the Chima TV show, which is pretty much exactly the same as what we got, despite a different placement of the title, which is pretty interesting to see here. But from there, I think it's time to take a look at the vehicles. And man, was there a lot of effort that went into making every single step of the vehicles feel as realistic as possible. First off here, we have the main Crocodile tank vehicle, which we never even got as an official LEGO set, which I think was one of the biggest missed opportunities of Chima, never getting this Croc Tank as a full-on LEGO set. But that didn't stop them from putting a lot of effort into designing the interior of the cockpit itself. So many intricate designs were made for this, which is really fascinating to see here. I love the amount of effort that just went into creating this world and creating the vehicles, and you can see so many different iterations and concept designs for the sketches of the vehicles themselves. This of course translates to the smaller crocodile tanks, which were based off of official LEGO sets, which you can see both in color and black and white here, and even the Croc Tank motorcycle type designs, which we saw as a side build for one of the Lion Temple sets. From there, we can take a look at the actual Croc Boat here, which is very close to what we saw as the actual LEGO set itself. Again, really like the aesthetic they decided on for the vehicles, which feels very, very detailed, and there's a lot of stuff going on. Of course, we have a lot of speedors for the crocodiles themselves, and here we can see some of the designs for the speedors, where a lot of detail was placed into actually deciding where the figure would be seated and how they would actually control it, right down to the ripcord being used to activate the vehicle itself, which obviously ties into the ripcord being used for the actual LEGO sets themselves. But moving on from that, we actually have a few concepts for the Eagle Jets. So the Eagle Jets here are a cool design, which again, you can really see how each and every part of the design was built up. They actually built this in a modular design, so they could actually break them apart and have each of the different components be broken apart in the show itself, from starting off with just a wing to the body itself, to both wings and the headpiece. It's just really cool how they put a lot of effort and thought into designing the Eagle vehicles, right down to the cockpit being a detachable escape pod, which is a very fun design that the official LEGO set could do as well. And from there, we have the Eagle Spires, which again is a really cool iteration and translation of the actual LEGO build. Obviously, they had a lot more visual clarity and a lot more freedom when designing this as compared to the official LEGO set, so they could make the beak a lot more pointed, make it a very angular design, which I really do appreciate translated to the actual show itself. But with that, we can move on to the lions. So here are some sketches of the lion tank here, which is of course based off an official LEGO set, but it's heavily stylized. I really like this style of artwork, which feels very cool and realistic to me. And then we have a very different design for a lion Speedors, which, if I had to assume, this was probably before they even knew what the toys would look like, and they were trying to come up with a design on their own, which feels very different than the eventual sets we got, but it's a very radically interesting design. And finally, we can end the vehicles with some of the Ravens here. You can see the main Raven jet being piloted here with a lot of detail being used for the greebling and the wings themselves, and the body shaping having a lot of different tubes and whatnot. Specifically note that they said the vehicle's built out of bits and pieces from other tribes, so it's supposed to be more or less asymmetrical. So guns, exhaust, and all these different types and pieces of it are built out of other vehicles, which is a really cool concept. But with that, we have summed up all of the different vehicle concepts, and we can now move on to the weapons. And oh boy, sure, LEGO did provide the concept for the weapons themselves being fully brick-built, but there were so many, and I mean so many different weapon designs. It's almost too many for me to cover just verbally. I'm honestly just going to let this play where you can see the sheer amount of work that went into designing each and every one of the weapons for the different animals. I love the amount of effort that went into this because they very easily could have just translated the LEGO pieces one-to-one, but no, they actually went out of the way to make fully stylized weapons and having them actually have individual lights, like a Croc blaster lighting up to fire out a charge, or the Eagle's axes having all sorts of different designs. They honestly did not need to put in this much effort into the weapons themselves, but the effort really paid off, and you can see just the amount of varied weapons you can find in the show itself, with all sorts of energy effects and different pieces of it lighting up. I just really appreciate the effort that went into this, and just look at how cool some of these designs are. But with that, we have finally summed up every single one of the concept designs, and that leaves us with just one more thing to look at, a concept video for the first half of the year for 2015. Now, Tommy Anderson revealed this concept video on Twitter, which was actually meant to explain the original storyline for the first half of the year of 2015, as mentioned. Now, what's really interesting is that he actually stated that this was supposed to be a 6-episode arc, rather than just a special, which is what we eventually got, and that it would have introduced Florax, Flinx's mother, the chief botanist of Chima, who unfortunately was cut from the show. Now here we can see the development of the Fire Wings, which again was supposed to be a multi-episode arc to claim them, which of course is why it feels very rushed in the final show itself. And then you can see the group being led by Panthar here, all donning unique outfits. I really like how all of the heroes actually have the tiger or leopard stripes as arms there. It's a really unique design for their armor there, and of course Sir Fangar and the rest of his troops look very different as well, where the zombified aspect is heavily emphasized even a lot more than the ice aspect. Now moving on, we actually see a lot more different shows of the troops training, like the rhinos all lined up and ready for battle, and even the bears and Cracker trying to train them, which honestly just makes me wish we actually got a rhinos and bears battle pack. Now I really like that Fangar has a purple cape here, which is very cool. I kind of wish he still retained that in the final set. And the ice bears themselves are very formidable. You can actually see one that's kind of like a Big Fig type creature right here, where unfortunately we never got a Big Fig like ice bear, but that sort of concept would have been used for Axel of Nexo-Knights. Now here we can see our heroes finally gaining the Fire Chi armor or the Phoenix wings, which of course, no big surprise here that they would eventually get them, but once donning them they would face their ultimate test. All of them would flame on with the wings themselves and take the fight into Mount Kavora to cleanse the land, which is very similar to the final storyline here, but of course it was done a lot shorter and in a more condensed version for the final episodes of the TV show. But that was the original concept for Chima 2015, and it's kind of a shame how it was cut so short. Alright, and with that, we have finalized our look at all of the Legends of Chima concept artwork, set prototypes, minifigure designs, and early artwork, all throughout this massive series of videos. Of course, let me know down in the comments below, what do you think? Do you like what we eventually got, or do you wish we got some of the stuff we saw in the concept art? And what do you think of the LEGO Legends of Chima theme as a whole? Would you like to see something like it return in the future, or do you want LEGO to focus on other things and other ideas? Either way, let me know, and please let me know if you enjoyed these videos, because I definitely will be making more on different LEGO themes. So if you have any themes you want to take a look at that I haven't covered already, please let me know in the description below. And if you don't know where to look, I've actually linked a playlist where you can see pretty much every single video that covers all the conceptual artwork and prototypes for different LEGO themes, from Vikings to Castle to Space Police 3, and all sorts of different stuff, even Ninjago in there. A lot of things that goes into the development of a LEGO theme, so definitely if you enjoyed these videos, please let me know. Thank you all so much, and be sure to subscribe to Duckbricks for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thanks so much, and bye-bye for now.